Hello, my name is Jeff Boguski. I'll be presenting on the North American Wetlands and Conservation Act, the Duck Stamp Act, and covering a presentation by Matt Kaminski, as well as going over a large ongoing wetland project in my home state of North Carolina. The North American Wetlands Conservation Act, or the NAWCA, began in the 1980s due to historic lows being reported in waterfowl populations across North America. In 1986, the United States and Canada adopted the North American Waterfowl Management Plan, or the NAWMP, which was followed by the NAWCA in 1989 to support it. In 1994, Mexico joined the NAWCA. Collectively, the NAWCA has the overall purpose of increasing bird populations, wetland habitat to support local economies, and the American tradition. Through the NAWCA, the protection, restoration, and enhancement of wetlands has occurred in all 50 states, Puerto Rico, the U.S. Virgin Islands, all 13 Canadian provinces, and all 31 Mexican states. Funding regarding the NAWCA comes from annual appropriations from Congress, from the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, and federal aid from the Sport Fish Restoration and Wildlife Restorations Act, along with fines, fees, and other regulatory fines that are taken in by each of these. Funding from these sources goes toward wetland conservation projects across the United States, Canada, and Mexico from two styles of grants, where at least $1 of non-federal money must be matched for every $1 of grant funds. These two types of grants involve standard grants, which occur on large scales across Canada, Mexico, and the U.S., and small grants, which are limited to $75,000 in the United States alone. So far, it has funded over 3,100 projects, totaling over $1.9 billion in grants, with 6,500 partners contributing over $3.9 billion in matching funds, affecting over 31.5 million acres of habitat across the United States, Mexico, and Canada. The federal duck stamp is also an important factor in wetland conservation. To quote the current year's hunting and conservation stamp, the funds generated by the purchase of the stamp are used to conserve wetland habitat in the National Wildlife Refuge System. Over 560 national wildlife refuges are found across the United States, most within driving distance from your home. Spend the day connecting with the outdoors on your public lands. And I gotta say, that's a beautifully said statement. The federal duck stamp began through the simple concept that waterfowl populations were heavily declining in the early 1900s. The Migratory Bird Hunting Stamp Act was introduced in 1934 and was amended in 1976 to the Duck Stamp Act, which required individuals of 16 years or older to buy a duck stamp every year, which would permit them to hunt waterfowl. The duck stamp changes each and every year, with its first iteration done by J. Dean Darling in 1934. Each year, a competition is held to determine what will be the following year's artwork on the duck stamps. Since its introduction, waterfowl populations have nearly doubled and are now greater than 48 million individuals, reflecting a very successful implementation. Funds raised from the stamp's purchase are placed in the Migratory Bird Conservation Fund, where the United States Fish and Wildlife Service utilizes it to purchase migratory bird habitat. The funding is approved by the Migratory Bird Conservation Commission, or the NBCC, which is comprised of 2 senators, 2 U.S. representatives, the EPA administrator, the chief of division of realty within the USFWS, and the secretaries for the Departments of the Interior and Agriculture. The Duck Stamp Act has resulted in over $800 million raised, in which 6 million acres have been protected. By law, 98% of these funds must go directly to wetland and associated habitats, and since its introduction has created or expanded upon 300 national wildlife refuges. In 1994, additional funding became accessible for our youth through the Junior Duck Stamp Program, which, similar to that of the Duck Stamp competition, incorporates an art contest to determine the next year's Junior Duck Stamp. This program helps teach students about wetlands and waterfowl conservation, while also providing funding for environmental education programs. Matt Kaminski, a regional biologist with Ducks Unlimited, focuses his research on wetland conservation in the Central Valley in California. He uses a 3-pronged approach, with a considerable human dimension involved with his work, which I find most interesting. Through Ducks Unlimited, he meets with habitat owners to determine potential projects while additionally finding grant sources through public dollars and utilizing them through expertise in combination with engineers in the creation of specific projects catered to individual species. He works with volunteers, in which he raises funds through local events, which permit him and his associates to showcase Duck Unlimited projects within the community. Another part of Matt Kaminski's presentation that I was really fond of was his historic changes, the things that he reflected in his talk. Before his presentation, I was completely unaware of the geological changes throughout history, which had occurred across the Central Valley Basin within California. In this location of the San Joaquin Valley, there were vast lakes, multiple subbasins were spread across the land, which included Lake Corcoran and the Tulare Lake, which was the largest lake west of the Mississippi some 50 to 100,000 years ago, based on what Matt said. And I actually think I found the exact same portrait or map of California that he used in his presentation, if I recall properly. In history, there were significant efforts conducted to tame this river system, to change wetlands across the basin. This area, although extremely dangerous for settlers, was a substantial benefit to waterfowl and contained roughly 44% of wintering waterfowl populations along this area, which included 3 million ducks and 3 to 4 million geese. This area at the time was nearly 4 million acres, but has since been reduced to 250,000 acres due to wetland conversion. Matt did a great job tying in this information and the historical disturbance records into how it translated the wetland habitat impacts in modern history, and how his work with Ducks Unlimited caters to this area through the prime habitat provided and the large concentrations of waterfowl managed by Ducks Unlimited. In this area, wetlands have largely been converted to rice fields, which are a considerable surrogate for wetland habitat, and it provides a resource high in energy, which is utilized by waterfowl, and it is here that Matt's team conduct management across the grasslands and wetlands spread across the San Joaquin Valley. Now on to my home state of North Carolina. Across North Carolina, there are currently 23 projects and 7 multi-state projects which are ongoing through the NAWCA or have been completed. In conjunction with Ducks Unlimited, the Roanoke River Migratory Bird Initiative is one of the most important to date and covers ground across both North Carolina and Virginia along the Roanoke River Basin. This project has been conducted in 3 stages and wishes to restore the basin to historical representations prior to dam implementation in recent history. To do this, partners within the projects wish to alter the river flow, conduct habitat conversion, and to reduce water quality degradation to mitigate negative impacts on wetland and migratory bird species in order to restore the habitat to its previous state. The United States Fish and Wildlife Service have been placed in control to manage the property and to control water levels to mimic the natural hydrology present prior to upstream dam construction. Although this project is truly wide-reaching and has been expanded considerably, I'm going to focus on the primary objectives surrounding waterfowl and migratory bird species. The information that I provide is but a small window of what this project covers today, and has since been expanded to multiple habitat types, wildlife species, and other important topics of conservation. As previously mentioned, the Roanoke River Migratory Bird Initiative has the purpose of restoring hydrology to previously historic states. This will be done with the purpose of providing sanctuary and habitat for wintering waterfowl and other migratory bird species across several thousand acres of the Roanoke River National Wildlife Refuge. Through these efforts, the USFWS and partners will seek to conserve the biological integrity and the diversity of the floodplain system while providing a much-needed boost to both public and private lands. While priority species of the now expanded project include terrestrial and aquatic species as well, the primary focus regarding waterfowl along the basin include wood ducks, wintering black ducks, mallards, and ringneck ducks. The primary goals are to conduct waterfowl and bird surveys throughout the course of the project to monitor and hopefully improve the species composition, percentage, abundance, and diversity of waterfowl species through strategic habitat conservation. Strategic Habitat Conservation, or SHC, is a science-based framework upon which management decisions are made about when, where, and how to deliver conservation efficiently and effectively to combat continually expanding threats from human development and invasive exotic species impacts. Geographically, the basin is massive, spanning across 442 miles of rivers and 9,875 square miles of drainage between the 2 states. The Roanoke River National Wildlife Refuge is one of 10 such national wildlife refuges found across North Carolina. The primary counties that cover the basin in North Carolina are the Nerdy, Martin, and Halifax counties, which cover a total of 20,978 acres around the river. The climate found in this area is primarily continental influence due to its inland nature, with only minor influences from ocean and marine factors, resulting in large temperature and seasonal variations. Along this area of the river, 3 key dams, the Roanoke Rapids, Gaston, and John H. Kerr Dams are present, with the first of those being the Roanoke Rapids. The first of these, the Roanoke Rapids Dam, became operational in 1955 and is 3,050 feet long, forming an 8-mile-long reservoir with a surface area of 4,600 acres and 47 miles of shorelines. The second of these, the Gaston Dam, was completed in 1963 and has 4 generators that produce up to 56 megawatts each. This dam is 3,600 feet long and 105 foot high, with more than 20,000 acres of surface area and 350 miles of shoreline. The last of these, the John H. Kerr Dam, was first opened in 1953. It is 2,785 feet across and in length, and the reservoir covers roughly 48,900 acres and 800 miles of shorelines. Funding and acreage have been kept up with over the course of the 3 initiatives put forth for the Roanoke River Migratory Bird Initiative. The first initiative, in 2003, was funded $965,339 by the NAWCA, with partners contributing $2,706,924, totaling $3,672,263 for over an expanse of 9,727 acres. The second initiative, in 2006, was funded $999,920 by the NAWCA, with partners contributing $2,795,686, in total $3,795,606 for only 2,159 acres. The third initiative, in 2009, was funded $1,378,712 by the NAWCA, with partners contributing $2,424,341, totaling $3,803,052 for 9,580 acres. Over the course of these 3 initiatives, both Ducks Unlimited and the NAWCA have really moved. They've done a lot with this area, so much so that they've continued the project. Habitat management plans involved in the thinning and restoration for previously unforested areas or unkempt areas are done, and water control to manipulate the seasonal water depth based on timing and duration are able to provide access to breeding grounds for waterfowl. Prescribed fire is used for site preparation, and the maintenance of stand diversity across various hardwood stands occurs along the basin. Partners with this project include the United States Fish and Wildlife Service, the North Carolina Attorney General's Environmental Enhancement Grant Program, the North American Wetlands Conservation Council, and Ducks Unlimited. And this project continues to be ongoing with a broad-ranging habitat management project plan, which encompasses all lands across the basin, with various waterfowl, terrestrial, and aquatic species across several habitat types. Thank you, and I hope you enjoyed my presentation. These are the references for where I got most of my information. Hello, my name is Jeff Boguski. I will be conducting this presentation on my home state of North Carolina and its lead and ammunition policies, along with comparisons between neighboring states and policies throughout recent history. Awareness regarding the hazards posed by lead ammunition to waterfowl and other game bird species began in as early as the 1870s. Concerns regarding lead tackle became more apparent in the 1970s upon the discovery that swans in the United Kingdom were poisoned. In the 1970s and 80s, the UK, parts of the US, and Canada began placing restrictions on the use of lead ammunition and fishing tackle. Lead remains intact and stable for decades and sometimes centuries in the environment. However, given the proper environmental conditions, it can be released and taken in by animals and plants, causing numerous issues. As a result, lead poisoning has become extensively researched in birds and has affected species like that of the California condor, swans, loons, and other game bird species. Daniel Ash, the director of the United States Fish and Wildlife Service in 2017, issued Director's Order 219, which would phase out lead-based ammunition and fishing tackle on 568 million acres of managed lands and water. and would be done so through the assistance of regional USFWS supervisors and state hunting officials, through targeted research, education, and the establishment of certain requirements. As this was done at the end of President Obama's administration, it was immediately put under fire at the start of the Trump administration and was revoked through Secretarial Order 3346. Despite this being the case, there are numerous advocates attempting to reinstate this order through the Biden administration. As of 2021, North Carolina has a partial ban on lead ammunition and tackle, but it does follow federal laws with some extensions worked in. Non-toxic shot must be used in harvesting duck, geese, swans, and coots across all lands in the state, and as an extension, non-toxic shot is required in the taking of captive or raised mallards on shooting preserves, in field trials, and during dog training activities. Despite this, lead buckshot is still permitted while deer hunting, and there are no limitations on lead tackle use throughout the state. Georgia takes its regulations a bit further. During hunting waterfowl, lead shot is completely prohibited across the state, and this includes its possession. When hunting duck and goose, non-toxic shot of size F or smaller is required, and hunting small game can only be done with shells no larger than 3.5 inches, but it does include the use of number 2 lead shot or approved non-toxic shot of regulation size. While both states do incorporate lead ammunition bans to some extent, they are both different and far from total bans. Both states under federal law find it unlawful to hunt waterfowl with any shotgun shell containing lead, and neither state allow the possession of anything but approved shot within federal waterfowl production areas. In North Carolina, specific regulations are limited to the hunting of reared mallards on shooting preserves or in the event of dog training. However, they do permit lead buckshot being used during deer hunting or in turkey load. In Georgia, lead shot cannot be possessed at all when hunting waterfowl across the state, and non-toxic shot of size F or smaller must be used for duck and goose hunting. However, lead shot is permitted in the taking of small game species. Now, there are non-toxic alternatives to using lead ammunition. As a hunter myself, I've dabbled in alternatives, but not very frequently because it is very cost prohibitive. Alternatives do include iron and copper, tungsten, bismuth, metal alloys, brass, all sorts of different combinations of these. As far as alternatives for tackle, you have steel fishing tackle. Now there's a ton of pros and cons, especially to the two that I selected, which were iron/steel or tungsten. As far as the pros for iron or steel, it is relatively cheap, it's easy to come by, and it's accessible, especially in mass amounts, or it's always available in bulk if you're going to buy. However, it comes with a large amount of cons. It causes a lot of issues in feeding, especially in high capacity magazines. It's also unreloadable. A lot of people actually had a friend of mine who liked to reload his own ammunition after being used. And steel shot itself is not reloadable. It has a large lacquer buildup in the chamber, which causes a lot of issues, and it rusts really quickly, so it causes issues within the barrel of the gun. Tungsten itself has a ton of pros, but its cons are very big as well. As far as pros go, it's extremely dense and it has a high tensile strength, so it's extremely hard. It's very environmentally friendly, and its structure is very well composed. It's also high quality, and you can use a lot less ammo to bag game, while it retains energy at a long range, so it shoots further, faster, and harder. However, its cons are that it's extremely expensive and it's difficult to manufacture, unlike iron, which is very easy to find. There are several proponents for and against lead banning. For individuals that are for it, they say that it's simple to implement through legislation, and it doesn't impair the ability to hunt due to alternatives. And there's huge benefits on the wildlife populations when it's exempted, because lead itself, under the right conditions, can be broken apart into the environment, and it can be absorbed by wildlife and water. There's no functional or beneficial role in the biological systems for lead, and it's toxic even at low levels, whether that's to wildlife or to us. And that it can cause nervous system and paralysis, neurological damage, tissue and organ damage, and reproductive impairment. For those that are against lead banning, as stated in our previous slide, it is effective and inexpensive to use. It's very easy to come by, just like iron or steel is, and it's naturally occurring in the environment. And there are performance variations from traditional lead products when using alternatives. It is difficult to find non-lead on the market, as noted with tungsten, and there's a large cost increase because of that. And as noted, finding 130 caliber lead bullets is around $24, while 130 caliber copper bullets is $34, looking at roughly a 45% hike increase. Now onto the history. Since as early as 2000 BC, there have been records of issues arising concerning lead-induced health risks. From the 1500s to present, there have been documented reports of lead poisoning identified within waterfowl, wild birds, human colonies, and there have been bans occurring across history to prevent additional risks. And as early as the 1870s, lead poisoning incidents concerning waterfowl began to be reported. In the 1930s, scientists began reporting lead poisoning in waterfowl and how widespread it was becoming. And in 1959, major scientific studies identified spent lead shot as a considerable hazard to waterfowl. Finally, in 1970, the Clean Air Act was passed, which began the environmental revolution concerning lead ammunition. Following the Clean Air Act's introduction, requirements and regulations began popping up in various states, which culminated in a lead shot ban for all waterfowl hunting across the United States. This was continued in 1997 by Canada, where it began to implement partial bans on lead tackle utilized for fishing. By 2000, 74 other nations had implemented some form of lead shot regulation, with 37 others preparing similar legislation. California then became the cornerstone state upon which the process to ban lead ammunition in its entirety begun, when native and endangered condors began passing due to lead poisoning. The Toxic Substances Control Act followed this by petitioning for nationwide bans on all lead ammunition and tackle, and the USFWS placed additional bans on its use for hunting nuisance birds. The late early 21st century saw a lot of changes starting to occur in the use of lead ammunition. Under the Obama administration, this became equally true through numerous policies and initiatives that occurred, and equally so, there were some which prevented its ban as well. In 2012, the misnamed Sportsman's Heritage Act limited the control of the EPA by preventing them from protecting wildlife from lead poisoning due to leftover hunting ammunition, and it drastically increased the accessibility to lands owned by the Bureau of Land Management and the Forest Service. In 2015 and 2016, Obama signed the National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, with a measure using the Toxic Substances Control Act to give the EPA the authority to outlaw chemical substances, which, although it did not include the lead component in all ammunition, it did open up the possibility for its inclusion through amendments in the desire to ban lead ammunition entirely in the future. In January of 2016, the Bipartisan Sportsman Act prohibited the regulation of lead poisoning from fishing tackle, and his final act in his presidency came days before the change in administration in Director's Order 219, which was proposed by the director of the USFWS in an attempt to limit lead ammunition across all federal lands. With the end of the Obama administration, the Trump administration made short work repealing Director's Order 219 through Secretarial Order 3346. In 2019, a proposed bill by the Trump administration would permit lead ammunition and tackle use on 2.3 million acres of land spanning across 147 federal wildlife refuges and fish hatcheries. In July of 2019, although not directly linked to his presidency, California finalized their process of banning lead ammunition through AB 711, which resulted in a total ban on lead ammunition statewide. Although off-topic in some ways, it does affect migratory bird species. In January of 2020, the Trump administration proposed regulatory changes which would weaken the Migratory Bird Treaty Act. And finally, a proposed bill, H.R. 7547 by Representative Ted Lieu, a Democrat in California, sought to ban lead ammunition on all U.S. FWS service lands. However, it hit a wall in Congress in 2020, but is still being considered amongst other omnibus bills being proposed. Although President Biden's administration has only just begun, it has already reversed numerous implementations from the Trump administration regarding environmental policies. Although not related to the lead ammunition ban quite yet, our rejoining of the Paris Agreement and the reinstatement of the National Environmental Policy Act remain the top recent accomplishments for the environment. In 2020, a historic firearms sale increase occurred, leading to 21 million firearms being sold, with 8.4 million of those sales being from first-time gun owners. Ammunition sales followed, with projected buyers purchasing over 420 million rounds. With this occurring, ammunition shortages became commonplace, and so did its importation, resulting in the hike of nearly 225% since 2019. To assist in this, the Biden administration sought to push for federal gun restrictions and taxes through the limitation of gun ownership and the ban of imported Russian firearms and ammunition. This included lead-based ammunition, which made up a considerable amount of imported product. In May of 2021, both Minnesota and New York proposed separate bills involving bans on the use or possession of lead ammunition when hunting in each state, and the restrictions on ammo lead composition to less than 1% in New York. These bills are similar to that of H.R. 7547 and its desire to ban lead ammunition. At the youth of his presidency, President Biden has already made headway on several policies involving the environment and lead ammunition. And as his presidency continues, he will be faced with several advocates wishing to reinstate Director's Order 219. Here are my sources, and thank you.